On behalf of the Wilson Center and Blair Rubel and Christian Osterman, I wanted to welcome you to this informal session. Ambassador Kenneth Hackett, United States Ambassador to the Vatican, the Holy See, is with us. He is eminently qualified for this position, having spent 40 years with Catholic relief services all over the world and a considerable amount of time in Baltimore, which is where the headquarters are. Ambassador Hackett will talk for about 15 minutes and then take some questions, and I'm very happy to have you here. In the third row, I'm not hearing that.
So we have to wait for something.
Well, we need to start the ambassador's time short, so we start. Okay. Yeah. There will be no Italian translation, unfortunately, for the next few minutes because the translator is on lunch break. Ambassador Hackett, welcome, and thank you for being with us and sharing some insights on Pope Francis. Appreciate your coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah.
I don't think this is...
Yes, I think up close.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you in spite of the traffic. If any of you have been trying to get around town this morning, it's unbelievable. I think Beppe Grillo is speaking or doing something over near my office at Circus Maximus, and the traffic is just blockage. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier. I had an event in the Vatican at 12:30, which I tried to postpone, saying that I was addressing this group. But the Vatican does things in special ways. To my appeal that we postpone, they answered no. Basta. But it is a pleasure to be here with you. This year we celebrate our 30th anniversary of formal diplomatic relations between the United States government and the Holy See. The relations between our two states actually go back quite far. We were able, in preparing for your 30th anniversary celebration, we did the history check, and we found in 1778 a letter from George Washington to the then Pius VI, given to the Pope through Benjamin Franklin, stating that it was not necessary, I think the words were, in our newly born republic, there was no need for the U.S. government to authorize the appointment of bishops. So that was the first correspondence. And then, of course, there was continued correspondence and engagement between our government and the Papal States, mostly around trade and protection of trade interests. But then it evolved over time, little by little, because, as many of you might know, there was significant opposition in the United States to opening formal diplomatic relations. And some of you can even recollect, looking around, I see some of you are as young as I am, can recollect the time of John F. Kennedy, when he kind of made statements which tried to assure people that he would not be a papist dupe. But President Reagan had other things in mind. He recognized very much the power, the personality, and the influence of now Pope John Paul II and the Pope's influence on world affairs, particularly in the Soviet Union, and what he was doing in Poland. And they actually struck up a type of personal chemistry, which led very directly in 1984 to the formal opening of diplomatic relations. So you've asked me to say something about not 1984 or 1778, but about Pope Francis today. The first thing I have to say is he did not win the Nobel Prize this morning. And I, for one, am a little bit relieved. I had two journalists who wanted to come in for an interview with questions such as, would you have voted for the Pope? And I didn't want to go there. So the award went to another, but if he had won, I wasn't sure he would accept it. Because in our analysis of what he has done over the last 16 months, 17 months of his papacy, he doesn't go with the big awards. He doesn't go with the big donors, the rich and powerful. He just doesn't attend to them as much as they would like him to attend to them. Yes, he meets with heads of state, prime ministers, doesn't meet with foreign ministers. So when Secretary Kerry came here the first time in January of last year, we had the challenge of telling first his advanced staff, then his chief of staff, and then him directly, the Pope is not going to meet with you, in spite of all the important things you have to say to him. But we had another occasion last year as well, where the Holy Father did meet with President Obama in the end of March. It was a wonderful encounter. It was a time when President Obama and Pope Francis, I believe, struck up a personal relationship. They came out of the room after 50 minutes laughing, joking, and the Pope doesn't speak English. But he gets it. So it was something special, and I'm hopeful that that rapport, which was developed during that almost 1 hour meeting, will continue when and if the Pope visits the United States, and I think he will in September of next year, and moves from Philadelphia, which he is due to visit, down to Washington and to the White House, and possibly even to address a joint session of Congress. Because Speaker Boehner, in my first month here, sent a letter which I had to deliver inviting the Holy Father to speak to a joint session of Congress. Now, the Holy Father represents values of tolerance, harmony, cohesiveness, but I am not sure that even the Holy Father is going to imbue those views into our Congress. I'm just not sure. So let me say something about Francis, the style, and Francis, the substance. And let me start with the style. So I think you've all read the newspaper articles about some of the anecdotal things that the media say he does. Most of them are true. I mean, the day after he was elected Pope, he walked downstairs to the front desk to pay his hotel bill. Now, all of us pay our hotel bills, but popes don't. And, I mean, the lady was flabbergasted. She didn't know what to do. But he's always paid his hotel bills. Within the first couple of weeks, he said to some of the people around him, who were still very much getting used to his style, "I want to go to the parking garage." And they're trembling. What does he want to go to the parking garage for? And he said, "No, I want to go down and see what kind of cars we have." Okay. And so they called somebody, and somebody else called somebody else. And off they go, taking him down to the parking garage. And he said, "That Ford Focus, who does that belong to?" And the man said, "Oh, Holy Father, that we use to deliver the mail. I want that one." And he now drives around in a blue Ford Focus. No bulletproof windows, like mine. No bodyguards, really. I mean, he just moves freely. His attitude of humility and simplicity, the way he dresses, how he engages people, the fact that he lives in Casa Santa Marta and not the Apostolic Palace. He just is bringing a new sense of not only the papacy, but what the church should be, and how bishops and priests and others in the Catholic Church should act, what they should value. And he is modeling those behaviors. Now, for you who have been diplomats, for you who have been academics, you can only imagine that he is driving his bureaucracy crazy, because they don't know what he's going to do next. You may have read that he penned a note to the Chinese president 4 weeks ago. Well, there are all kinds of China experts in the various offices of the Curia in the Vatican. Some of them have been dealing with China for 40 years. He didn't ask them what they thought about his note to the Chinese president. He just sent it with some friends from Argentina who were going to China. The invitation to Abu Mazen and Perez and Bartholomew to come to the Vatican for a peace discussion, he conceived by himself after an interview with an Israeli journalist before he went to Jordan. He just thought, this would be a good idea. Now, how do I get them to come to the Vatican? And so, when he arrived in Jerusalem, he just asked them. But he didn't consult with the people in his Secretary of State. He just told them, this is what I'm going to do. So he's driving those people a little bit batty. But for those people who have known him for years, they say that a new sense of freedom has come over him. He is uncluttered with the baggage of bureaucracy. He believes that there are things that have to be done that he can do. And he knows that he will make mistakes but he's going to do it anyway. Nothing was happening on the peace process. Secretary Kerry was here, briefed the Secretariat of State in the Vatican for over an hour about what should happen, and then it didn't happen. And the Pope just decided, well, I'll try something. So in terms of his style, he is free, he is open, he is direct, he's humble, he's simple, but not unsmart. We feel that he is strategic. And from the diplomatic point of view, it's fun being an ambassador here. He keeps us hopping all the time. On the substantive side, obviously, after the conclave that voted him in, he read the signals and signs, and he saw there was great concern about Vatican finances, about the organization in the Vatican, that it was partially dysfunctional, and that his charge in being voted as Pope in one incidence would be to do something about that. His predecessor, Benedict, had started working on the finances and had brought in some top people to begin cleaning out the barnacles and warts that had infected Vatican finances for years. Some of you might remember Blackfriars Bridge and that body hanging off it. It never got cleaned up after that. Just didn't get cleaned up. So what Francis did is he took the cardinal who had raised his voice the loudest over the years about Vatican bureaucracy, curial inefficiency, and he said to him, fix it, and I'll give you the power. And Cardinal Pell from Australia has been charged with fixing the finances in the Vatican and the organization of its operations. So that means the human resource function, hiring, firing, et cetera, making sure there's rationality to budgets, making sure there's efficiencies where they can be affected. And in that process, what has happened is that Cardinal Pell has hired Ernst & Young, has hired the Promontory Group out of New York, and other professional consulting firms to help look at the issues and make recommendations. And thus, things are changing in a very positive way. I had people from the New York Federal Reserve in early September, and they wanted to go and meet in the Vatican with the Vatican Bank, with the central, what in essence is the central bank of the Vatican, to find out what was going on. And they came away deeply impressed with the changes that have happened and will continue to happen. I play tennis with the gentleman who's the head of the Vatican anti-money laundering group. And he has just cleaned that thing up like it's no tomorrow. He's a pro from Liechtenstein, worked on Wall Street. So there's good people affecting change in the operations in the Vatican. He has brought in Lord Patton of Hong Kong fame and BBC fame to look at how the structuring of all of the communications and media apparatus should be rationalized. Vatican Radio, Vatican Television, Observatory Romano, social communication, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's about a $40 to $50 million enterprise. And the feeling is, after they brought in McKinsey to look and make some recommendations, that the enterprise can be run much more effectively and much more efficiently. So Francis has passed these management, fix the organization kind of things to somebody else and said, do it. And where he's put his attention in is the substance. So right now, there is a meeting of 900 cardinals, bishops, lay people over in Vatican City looking at the issues of the family from many, many different angles. And Francis has decided we're not just going to have one meeting come out of it and I'll make some decisions. He's going to have another meeting in 2015 on the same topic and let debate happen, discussion happen between these two meetings, and then in 2015 maybe we can come to some conclusions. And unlike many of his predecessors I read this morning, when he opened this synod of bishops, he didn't just pray that it will be successful. He acted in a very CEO type of way, and he said, this is how your discussion should take place, with openness, with charity. Listen to people. Don't condemn them. I mean, he gave instructions on how the meeting should operate. Very different than has ever been done before. So substantively, he's taking on some of the big issues. Family is a big one. He's also trying to model and redefine the role of a bishop. He has given, on numerous occasions, instructions to different groups of priests on how they should act. Shed the Gucci clothes, shed the loafers, the BMWs. That's not what you're supposed to be about. He told bishops, don't take priests who are not balanced. I mean, that seems obvious, but the fact of the matter is there are many bishops in places in the world that don't have enough priests. Somebody comes to them, they were kicked out of the seminary in Germany, they show up in France, they speak French, and the bishop says, well, I need some priests, and you speak French, and well, I know you tried in the seminary. The fact that you got kicked out doesn't really mean anything. And they take them. So Francis is saying, these are not the type of people that should be the pastors in the church. So he's putting his personal energy into these bigger, juicier matters. He's trying to define the church as a place of mercy, of welcome, not a place of rules and regulations. That's a big change. So I'll finish by just saying, I copied down 6 points about what Francis is doing from an individual. He's an Irishman, and he's been watching the Vatican for about 30 years. And he said, here's what he's taking from Francis's management advice. Don't stand over your employees. Sit down with them. And he does that. He invites people to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him. People from all around Italy, people from anywhere. Don't judge, assess. Catholic Church traditionally has been pretty judgmental on many things. He's calling for people to look at the situation, look at the reality and balance it against the ideas. Take care of people, not lobbies, which I thought was an interesting concept, because too often the tops of a political entity will attend to those people who are lobbying them. Go where you're needed. You saw where he went to Lampedusa early in his papacy. He wants to go to Turkey. That's making a lot of people really nervous. He went to Albania last weekend. I mean, he's going to Strasbourg, and he's going to France, and maybe he's going to the United States. January, he goes to Sri Lanka. Those of you who know about Sri Lanka know how complicated it's going to get. So if he favors the Tamils, he's going to get a pushback from the other side. Then he's going to the Philippines. Always a difficult place, having lived there for 5 years, keeps you on your toes. So he makes life interesting, and I retired from Catholic Relief Services in February 2012. My wife and I moved to Florida. I was improving my golf game and my tennis game. And the White House called. That was under Pope Benedict. Well, it didn't take me long. My wife said, yeah, Rome would be fun, even under the papacy of Benedict. That might not be so terribly interesting, but at least it'd be a fun place, Rome, for a couple of years. And within a week, Benedict resigned. And within a month, Francis entered the scene. And 3 months after that, the Senate confirmed me, and here we are. And this has been a really fun job. So I thank you very much.
Those are marvelous insights, and I have opened the floor if anybody would like to ask Ambassador Hackett a question. If not, the chair might start with a question. This is the first Jesuit pope. This is the first pope from Latin America, I believe. 40% of the Catholics in the world are in Latin America. In the last 20, 30 years, the evangelicals have made extraordinary gains in the Western Hemisphere. That's one set of problems. And the other set you alluded to, I guess, the Vatican bureaucracy at least is known to some of us in the United States, and this may be unfair, as being very Eurocentric. And I'm curious how he is approaching, or how you think he's going to approach these two sets of issues in two different parts of the world.
Well, indeed, he is very much a Jesuit. I myself went to secondary school and college with the Jesuits, and I see those Jesuitical elements in his style, in his spirituality, in his ability to tolerate not only big ideas and to encourage big ideas, but to encourage dissent. If you are the provincial of a Jesuit community, you are the provincial of a large group of men only who have studied at least 20 years. very few Jesuits nowadays don't have their master's degree, and many have their PhDs. So in the debate that goes on within a Jesuit community, it's alive, and you better be ready for differences of opinion and be able to deal with them. So he's very much a Jesuit in that regard. On the issue of him being from Latin America, this is a very interesting challenge for those of us from North America. Because more than one close advisor to Pope Francis, people who have lunch with him and who sit and talk with him, have said to me, he doesn't understand North America. He doesn't get you. He doesn't understand your politics. Maybe he doesn't understand your bishops. And he doesn't speak English. He understands English, but he's not coming out of any extended period of time living in the United States. We couldn't trace any time living in the United States. We presume that he passed through Miami on his way to someplace else. But as you know, Miami Airport is not like being in the United States. So that's an interesting challenge. He definitely brings a Latin America view. There was a very large meeting that took place in Aparecida, Brazil, about 6 years ago. It convened most of the Catholic bishops from Latin America, and they discussed substantive things, and he was the one that put the final report together. If you take that report and begin to synthesize it, you will see many of the things that he is doing now strategically are in that report. So while it was clear that he got his instructions from the other cardinals at the conclave to fix the bank, fix the inefficiencies in the Vatican, the substance issues of the family, priests, bishops, how they act, were very much in that Aparecida report. So you can find the basis of his strategic thinking there. Evangelicals are growing very fast in parts of Latin America and parts of the world. And interestingly enough, he has had at least 3 meetings here in the Vatican with American, European, and Latin American evangelical pastors. What he's trying to do, I don't know. But when I see him, I can't get a meeting with him and Secretary Kerry, and he goes and meets with the pastors of some mega churches in Florida and Alabama and Texas, I start scratching my head. I don't know where he's coming from on that. I'll give you another little anecdote. So I'm with the Secretary of State, and we're talking about coming to the United States, and I offered him a plan, dates and things like that, and he said, you know, we really don't know what the Holy Father wants to do about the U.S. visit. And he said, let me give you an example. Last week, he announced that he was going to see his Argentinian friend, who is a Protestant Pentecostalist pastor in Caserta, down near Naples. And he just announced that he was going down on Friday. And so the people who backstop the Pope are saying, whoa, okay, we're going to Caserta for a meeting with your Protestant Pentecostalist pastor. And it was announced. And of course, the bishop and the Catholic people in Caserta hit the ceiling. What, he's going to ignore us? He's coming to see the Protestant pastor and he's not going to say hello to the Catholics? So, of course, what the bureaucracy in the Vatican had to do is he went down on Friday, he came back, he went back down on Sunday and met with the Catholics. They even think that he may do the same thing when he goes to Paris. He's just unpredictable in that way. But it also says that he has personal friendships and experience with the evangelicals and the Pentecostalists, Protestant, Catholic. He's not adverse to engaging them at all. What it will mean in the bigger sense for people converting from Catholicism to those religions, I don't know. But he's certainly attracting a lot of people back to Catholicism. Just the last point on the Curia as being Eurocentric. First of all, Francis himself has convened a group of 8 cardinals from around the world as his kitchen cabinet. So there's one from South America, one from Congo, one from India, one from the United States, one from Honduras, I forget where the others are from. And they meet regularly, like 6 times a year. And he uses them to bounce off ideas, to get suggestions, to get ideas about appointments of people. Who should take this position, who should take that position. And then we're starting to see in his appointment of bishops and heads of offices in the Vatican some non-Italian, non-European appointments. Beginning. But to change a bureaucracy, even one that is in some ways relatively small, the budget of the Vatican is something in the range of $360 million. That's not big. But since it is an organization that's been around for a long time with systems that have been around for a long time, it doesn't change easily.
Yeah. We have 5 minutes, and I think I see 3 hands. Very quick questions. Each of you ask a question, and then Ambassador Hackett will try and say something. 1 question here, 1 there, and 1 there. Very quickly. Let's go, because we only have 5 minutes before we have to go to the next panel. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring insight. My name is Mushira Khattab. I'm from Egypt. I'm a Muslim, and I think it's a brilliant idea that the Pope has made this initiative on the Middle East. It will bring back the balance to the issue that has been taking an Islamic rhetoric over the last 2 decades, I think. I think it is best that the Pope uses his insight. Don't open the files, don't look at the history, and just make this innovative, simple idea, similar to what Nelson Mandela did with Horta in Indonesia. Thank you.
Can you pass that to the gentleman with the purple shirt, if it's purple, or blue?
I can speak loud now. I have only 2 interconnected questions. My name is Sergei Zhuk from Ball State University in Indiana, Russian-Ukrainian historian. What is Pope's take on Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now? And related to this, what about the relations of Curia and Vatican with Russian Orthodox Church, especially during this period of time?
Thank you. And 1 more question over here.
Good evening. My name is Paolo Mazzoletti. I'm in the board of Centro Studi Americani, so we're happy to greet you here. Just a quick question to the ambassador. According to your judgment and to your long experience as a diplomat, Francis is becoming a star all over the world. Is a media man. Is loved and is really a great star. what's your judgment about the change? As you said, the institution has been there for 2,000 years plus, and it's been always a great political power. You think that is really going to do something to change the specific of the strategies, or perhaps you will have some difficulties? And you understand what I mean.
Let me start with this question. Obviously, he's going to have difficulties. He's going to have a lot of difficulties. There are people who are acting in a passive-aggressive way. There are people who are applauding him and saying, lead us. You have all measure of people. I believe that he sees his legacy as changing the church. It's big. He took the name Francis, following on what the stories say. Francis received a vision. God said, Francis, change my church or build my church. That's what he's doing. He's 77 or 78 years old. People who have known him since he was 40 say that he has more energy now than he did 20 years ago. So I think he's going to leave a legacy. Russian-Ukrainian conflict, Russian Orthodox Church. First of all, I don't feel qualified to answer the question. Secondly, we don't have enough time even to begin talking. I can tell you this, that in the beginning of his papacy, he made determined efforts to reach out to the Patriarch in Moscow. He sent at least 4 delegations or delegates up to Moscow in the first 12 months. And then Ukraine happened. Now, if you diagram sentences like we're supposed to do, you see that the Vatican really hasn't condemned Russia around Ukraine. It has talked about territorial integrity, but it hasn't launched a blast. And it's our feeling that he still wants to make headway with the Orthodox churches, and he still wants to find a path at Christian unity. And if he alienates Kirill in Moscow, it's going to set it back for decades, if not centuries. So that's one of his big substantive agenda items. At the same time, Archbishop Shevchuk in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic, was a bishop in Argentina when Bergoglio was the archbishop. So they're buddies. When Shevchuk comes here, he goes and has breakfast with the Pope. So if you're trying to figure out who's the Pope listening to, that's one place he's listening to on Ukraine, one of the many. I'll tell him to use his insight, I'll tell him, but I think he's spontaneous, he's smart, he's strategic, and he will disregard the script when he thinks it doesn't work for him.
Let's give the ambassador a round of applause. Thank you very much for coming.